When we talk about challenges in animal agriculture, a really common and honestly heartbreaking one is piglet mortality. It gets discussed a lot. But what if the very things we do to try and save lives were, in a kind of twisted irony, actually creating another problem, maybe even a darker one? Today, we're moving beyond just accidental losses. We're diving deep into something called piglet savaging. It's a severe form of maternal aggression in sows, and it presents this profound paradox in modern farming. So our mission today is to take all the articles, the research, the expert notes you've shared with us, and really pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge. We want to truly understand this complex, often misunderstood issue.
Exactly. And it's so important right from the start to get that this isn't simply about a bad mother. That's really missing the point. What we're about to explore, it reveals this fascinating multifactorial problem. It really highlights a deep conflict between a pig's evolved biology and, well, the artificial constraints of our modern systems. We'll be looking not just at the critical animal welfare side of things, but also the pretty significant economic ripple effects this behavior has.
Okay, so let's start right there, defining terms. What exactly is piglet savaging? Can you walk us through that?
Sure. So at its core, piglet savaging is an acute, meaning sudden and severe form of maternal aggression. This is where a sow, or actually more often a gilt, that's a first-time mother injures or even kills her own newborn piglets. And it almost always happens very quickly after birth, typically within the first, say, 48 hours.
And what does that actually look like? I mean, behaviorally.
Well, it often starts even before the first piglet is born. You might see the sow becoming visibly restless, agitated. Then, as farrowing progresses, this can escalate into really overt aggression. She might give warning barks if a piglet comes near her head. The actual attack itself is violent, it's direct. She might seize a piglet in her mouth, bite it, toss it, or even intentionally crush it. And in the most extreme cases, yeah, it can progress to cannibalism, though technically eating the piglet is a separate behavior from the initial aggressive attack itself.
That's wow. But what's really fascinating, you mentioned this earlier, is that the aggression isn't always a specific rejection of the piglets themselves.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. It seems less about the sow actively thinking, I reject this piglet, and more that she's completely overwhelmed and just lashing out. Research has even shown that savaging sows might do similar things, aggressive actions towards inanimate objects, like a brick put in the pen.
A brick, really.
Yeah. It strongly suggests the behavior is more a manifestation of a generalized state of extreme fear or pain, or just profound psychological distress. It's not necessarily a targeted failure to recognize her own young.
Okay, that makes sense. So then how do we tell the difference between savaging and accidental crushing? Because crushing is still the #1 cause of death, right? But the reasons are totally different.
Vastly different, yeah, absolutely. The main difference really boils down to intent and how the sow is behaving. Savaging is active, it's intentional aggression. The sow is agitated, often making aggressive noises, deliberately attacking. Crushing, on the other hand, is typically accidental. The sow might be calm, maybe she's ill or a bit lame, and she just makes an uncontrolled or clumsy movement. In fact, a healthy, calm sow usually responds to a piglet's distress squeal by shifting her weight away from it, trying to free it.
Ah, okay.
But a savaging sow, because she's already in that highly stressed, fearful state, might actually be triggered into more aggression by those same squeals.
And I suppose post-mortem evidence would be pretty clear, too.
Oh, absolutely definitive. If you examine the piglet afterwards, savage piglets have characteristic injuries, things like tooth marks, deep puncture wounds, sometimes these distinctive triangular tears, often on the head, shoulders, or hindquarters. Crushed piglets, they'll show signs of severe compression, internal bleeding, broken bones, but they won't have those bite marks. That's the key differentiator.
Right, and this is where that paradox you mentioned really hits home. We designed something like a farrowing crate to stop crushing.
And inadvertently create conditions that can trigger savaging.
Exactly. It's a profound conflict. Farrowing crates were developed to reduce crushing by restricting the sow's movement,
Yeah.
and they do work for that purpose. But that intense confinement is a massive stressor, especially for gilts, those first-time mothers. It completely thwarts her powerful innate drive to build a nest before giving birth, digging, arranging material.
So you combine that confinement-induced stress, the fear, the frustration, and those are primary triggers for savaging. It really is this fundamental conflict. You could almost call savaging a pathology of confinement, while crushing is more a risk of freedom. The sources really frame it that way.
Okay, so it's definitely not just a simple behavioral flaw. It sounds much deeper, more systemic.
Far from simple, yeah. It's probably best understood as a kind of pathological outcome. It happens when cumulative stressors just overwhelm the sow's natural maternal instincts. It's like a breaking point.
And you mentioned guilts for first-time mothers are more prone.
Yes, that's the single biggest risk factor we know of, being a primiparous gilt. The rates of savaging are significantly higher in gilts, maybe 3, 4, 5%, compared to older, experienced sows where it's closer to 1%.
Wow, that's a big difference. Why?
Well, it seems to be a combination of factors. Simple inexperience, definitely. Fear of the unknown, the pain of first birth,
Hmm.
and also, crucially, a lack of social learning. In a more natural setting, gilts would watch experienced sows farrow. They'd learn how to behave.
Which they don't get in many modern systems.
Exactly. They're often isolated. And we see a direct link. Gilts that are more fearful also have higher levels of stress hormones, like cortisol, and that predicts poorer maternal behavior, including savaging.
That's fascinating about the hormones. How exactly do they play into this? Is it just stress, or are there specific imbalances?
Hormones are absolutely central. Think of it like a complex hormonal cascade that needs to happen perfectly for normal mothering behavior. Around birth, you need the right balance of hormones like estrogen, progesterone, oxytocin, which is crucial for bonding, and milk letdown, and prolactin. Savaging is linked to dysregulation here. Maybe high estradiol, low progesterone, or even weird levels of oxytocin, both too high and too low, have been implicated. And often these hormonal imbalances are themselves downstream consequences of stress, whether that's from pain, fear, handling, the environment. Stress elevates cortisol, and cortisol messes with these crucial maternal hormones.
So it's all interconnected. What about genetics? Is this something that runs in families, so to speak?
Yes, there's definitely a genetic component. It's heritable, which is important because it means it can be selected against.
Thanks.
Estimates for heritability are somewhere between, say, 0.11 and 0.25, which isn't super high, but it's significant enough. Researchers using genome-wide association studies have even pinpointed some candidate genes, things involved in brain pathways and emotional regulation.
Interesting.
And anecdotally, producers often report breed differences. Maybe purebred large whites are a bit more prone than landrace or Duroc crosses, perhaps linked to temperament or even unintended side effects of selecting heavily for other production traits.
So beyond the sow herself, her hormones, her genes, her experience, how does the actual environment trigger or worsen savaging? Confinement is obviously huge, but what else?
Right, confinement is a big one, but is part of a wider set of environmental and management triggers. The farrowing environment itself is key. Just moving a gilt abruptly into a restrictive crate right before she's due, without any time to get used to it, that's a major stressor.
How long should they have?
Ideally, 3 to 7 days for proper acclimatization. The sensory environment matters too, keeping things quiet, calm, maybe dim lighting. Although interestingly, some evidence suggests continuous lighting might actually reduce fatal savaging, maybe by helping the gilt see the piglets better. But probably the single most significant environmental factor is frustrated nesting.
That drive you mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So haas have this incredibly powerful, hardwired instinct to build a complex nest in the hours before farrowing. Standard crates make this impossible, and that causes immense frustration and stress. You can see it, they perform more posture changes, they bite the bars more. But providing simple nesting material straw is great, but even things like jute sacks or sawdust allows them to perform that behavior.
Then that helps.
Significantly. It reduces pre-farrowing stress, measurably lowers cortisol levels, and leads to calmer farrowing and much better maternal care. It's a huge welfare positive. Other things matter too, of course. A very long or difficult birth dystocia is painful and stressful, and that can trigger aggression. Same if the sow is an overly fat body condition.
And the piglets themselves, can they sort of inadvertently set the sow off?
Yes, that's the final piece, the influence of piglet stimuli. Think about those high-pitched squeals piglets make when they're distressed, maybe cold or stuck.
Right.
In a calm, normal sow, those sounds trigger caregiving. She'll nudge them, try to help. But in a sow that's already fearful, pained, anxious, those same squeals can act as additional stressors. They can heighten her agitation and push her towards an aggressive, defensive response. It all depends on her internal state. So if you tie it all together, piglet savaging isn't just a random bad behavior. It's really a syndrome. It emerges from that deep conflict between the pig's evolved biology. Remember, wild pigs farrow alone in nests they build, savaging isn't seen there, and the artificial constraints of modern production. Things like social isolation, severe confinement, no chance to nest, maybe disruptive human interactions, especially when combined with selection for high productivity, which might have inadvertently weakened some maternal traits. It's been called a catastrophic breakdown of maternal behavior, a pathology that arises directly from our production methods.
That completely reframes it, doesn't it? It shifts from blaming bad mothers to looking at a systemic challenge.
Precisely.
So, okay, if the worst happens and savaging does start, what's the immediate plan?
Good.
How do you actually protect the piglets right then and there?
Right. Crisis management. The absolute first priority is protecting the piglets. This means constant, vigilant supervision is ideal, especially for gilts, looking for those early signs, nervousness, maybe aggression towards the very first piglet born. If savaging starts, you need to immediately and safely remove all the piglets, both those already born and any still coming.
Get them out of there.
Get them out. This is often called boxing the piglets, putting them in a secure container, keeping them warm and dry, usually with a heat lamp. And crucially, stock person's safety is paramount. An aggressive sow is dangerous. Always use a sorting board or some kind of protective barrier, and try to remain calm and quiet yourself. You don't want to escalate her stress further.
Can you use medication to calm the sow down? To get her to accept the litter?
Yes, pharmacological intervention is often necessary. The goal is to tranquilize or sedate her enough to reduce that fear and aggression, hopefully allowing her to accept the piglets for nursing. The most common drug used is azaparone, often known by the brand name Stresnol. It's a sedative given by injection. And a really key point after giving it is to leave the sow completely undisturbed for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. Let the drug take full effect. If you bother her during that time, it might not work as well.
Okay.
There's also another drug, primidone, an anticonvulsant, that can sometimes be used preventatively in gilts known to be high risk, given orally for a day or two before farrowing. And addressing underlying pain is important too. Using an NSAI, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug like meloxicam, can help manage pain from parturition, which could be a contributing trigger.
Right, the pain factor.
Exactly. So once the sow is hopefully calmer, you carefully, gradually reintroduce the piglets, always under very close supervision.
And what happens to the piglets that survive the initial attack but might be injured? Or if the sow just doesn't calm down?
Good question. After the immediate crisis, you have to assess the surviving piglets. That means triaging them. Sadly, some might have injuries too severe to treat, and humane euthanasia is the kindest option there.
Yeah.
For those with survivable injuries, veterinary care is needed, cleaning wounds, maybe antiseptics, sometimes surgical glue or staples, and often systemic antibiotics to prevent infection. If the sow remains aggressive even after sedation, or if she doesn't show any maternal behavior, then cross-fostering becomes necessary. You need to find a suitable nurse sow. And a critical point here is colostrum. Piglets absolutely need that first milk within the first 6 to 12 hours for immunity. If they haven't suckled from their mother, you must give them stored or artificial colostrum.
That's vital.
Absolutely vital. The ideal nurse sow is one with a calm temperament, good mothering ability, and who farried herself within the last 24 to 48 hours. To help with acceptance, you can try scent matching, rub the foster piglets with bedding from the nurse sow's litter, or let them mix in the creep area for a while, and always try to foster within the same farrowing room or batch to minimize disease spread.
Okay, so those are the immediate reactive measures, clearly crucial, but the real goal has to be long-term prevention, right? That's the sustainable, humane approach.
Absolutely. Prevention is always better than cure, especially here. Prophylactic strategies need a holistic view. It's about focusing on the sow's physical, psychological, and social needs throughout her entire life cycle, but especially during gilt development and around the time of birth.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, first, gilt development and acclimatization. Gentle, positive handling during gestation helps gilts be less fearful of humans and generally less stressed. Giving them that proper acclimatization period, 3 to 7 days in the farrowing pen before they're due, is really important. Let them get used to the space. Housing gilts next to calm, experienced sows can also have a settling effect. It's kind of mimicking that social learning they miss out on. And managing their body condition, avoiding them getting too fat, is also helpful.
And the environment itself, beyond just acclimatization.
Optimizing the farrowing environment is huge. While crates do reduce crushing, exploring alternative systems like freedom farrowing pens that allow more movement and natural behavior is definitely part of the conversation, though they have their own challenges, like managing crushing risk. But honestly, the single most impactful environmental change you can make is providing nesting material.
Back to the nesting. It seems so fundamental.
It really is. Giving them straw, jute, sawdust, something to manipulate and arrange fulfills that incredibly powerful innate drive. We've seen it time and again. It reduces stress, lowers cortisol, leads to calmer farrowing, better mothering. It's probably the best bang for your buck intervention environmentally. Also, keeping that environment quiet, calm, dim during farrowing helps. Maybe using background noise to habituate them to normal farm sounds can also reduce startling.
What about breeding? Can we select away from this?
Yes, definitely. Genetic selection and culling policies are key long-term tools. Since we know maternal aggression is heritable, breeders can actively select for calmer sows with better maternal instincts. There are breeding values, EBVs, available for these traits now, and having a strict culling policy is vital. A gilt that savages her first litter has a much higher risk, maybe around 14% of doing it again, compared to less than 1% for a gilt who is a good mother first time round.
So you wouldn't give her a second chance?
Generally, the recommendation is no. The risk is too high, both for welfare and economics. So, accurately recording every single savaging event is crucial data for making those culling and breeding decisions. And finally, just good farrowing supervision and husbandry. Being present during farrowing, especially for gilts, allows for that early detection and intervention we talked about. Things like inducing or synchronizing farrowing can help concentrate labor when supervision is most needed. And the routine use of analgesics, like NSAIDs, around farrowing to manage pain is becoming more common and is certainly beneficial. It's really about connecting all those risk factors we identified earlier to concrete, evidence-based solutions.
Okay, so we understand the behavior, the causes, the interventions, the prevention. What's the actual bottom line impact on the farm's economics and, maybe more importantly, on the animals themselves?
The impact is pretty severe on both fronts. Let's talk economics first. There are direct costs. Simply the lost revenue from the piglets that are killed. Savaging might account for, say, 1 to 3% of total piglet mortality, but it's over 11% of pre-weaning deaths where the cause is known. And each weaned pig has a significant value, maybe $30, $40 depending on the market. That adds up quickly.
Yeah, you lose a few per litter.
Exactly. Then there are the indirect costs, which are often even bigger. Prematurely culling a gilt that savage means you lose that entire investment in raising her one model, put that loss at over $1,100 per animal.
Wow.
Plus, you have all the extra labor costs for that intense supervision, removing piglets, treating them, cross-fostering, and the vet costs for sedatives, painkillers, antibiotics. It all impacts the farm's overall productivity. Fewer pigs weaned per sow per year.
It's clearly costly. But what about the welfare side? This sounds incredibly traumatic for everyone involved.
It absolutely is, and that's critical to understand. For the piglets, the welfare impact is obvious and horrific. Extreme fear, acute pain from violent injuries, often a truly brutal death. It's been called one of the most severe welfare insults possible in early life.
Hard to imagine worse.
Right. But just as importantly, we need to think about the sow's welfare. It's a fundamental misunderstanding, and frankly unfair, to just label a savaging sow as vicious or a bad mother. The act of savaging is actually a clear, dramatic signal that the sow herself is experiencing extreme psychological distress, fear, pain, or confusion.
So the behavior is a symptom.
Exactly. It's a symptom of her own severely compromised welfare. It's a pathological response because she's overwhelmed by her environment or her internal state. Recognizing that completely shifts the focus. It moves us away from just reacting to a problem behavior and towards proactively supporting the sow's needs, her physical needs, her psychological needs, behavioral needs to prevent the distress that leads to this tragedy in the first place.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening in? We've gone really deep into piglet savaging today. We've understood it not as just some isolated freak problem, but as a really complex syndrome. It shows how much you can uncover when you peel back the layers, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen it's multifactorial, right? Rooted in that basic conflict between the sow's ancient evolved biology and the constraints of modern production systems, and how it hits first-time mothers hardest because of that mix of inexperience, fear, hormones being out of whack, and environmental stress, especially that thwarted nesting instinct.
We've really highlighted that the best solutions aren't quick fixes. They're about long-term, holistic prevention, thinking about everything from how gilts are raised to optimizing their environment, especially giving them that nesting material, right through to genetic selection and just really good husbandry.
Which I think raises a broader question for you listening. When you encounter complex problems, maybe in your work, maybe elsewhere, do you find yourself looking for the quick fix, the simple answer? Or do you push yourself to dig deeper, to try and understand those underlying systemic conflicts and stressors that might be driving the issue?
Yeah, maybe consider how this deep dive into something as specific as pig behavior could reframe how you look at any complex problem.
Hmm.
Recognizing that what looks like an individual flaw or just a one-off incident might actually be a really potent symptom of a much larger systemic challenge, a challenge that really demands a more thoughtful, holistic solution.